But because you got bored, you decide to implement all these different things that hurt your business. Just because you got bored doesn't mean you should change everything. Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Matthew Welsh, and welcome to the Leaders Only podcast, where we talk about business, leadership, mindset, and it's pretty much anything revolved around building an incredible life. You know, the reason that I started this podcast is because I felt like on the way to where we're at now, there wasn't really a place to go learn tangible skill sets, leadership qualities, and mindset strategies that you can learn today, apply today, and get immediate results. And so the goal of this podcast is to teach you the things that you need to actually win, to actually change your life, and to actually grow your business and grow your team if you're someone that's in the leadership role. And so if you can do me a favor, if you ever get something out of our message, if you ever get something out of the content, if you can like, share, subscribe, just tell people about it. We put out all this information for free. And so all we ask is that you share it with a friend if you get something out of it. So with that being said, thank you guys so much, and let's tune in.
Let's go. I'm a big mood. You can't name a lot of things.
And today we're going to be talking about why most people or how most people destroy their business from within, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. It's literally self-sabotage to their business, to their organization, to their growth. And I want to talk about what leads to that today. And one of the biggest things that leads to that is you getting too creative. And we're going to talk about what leads to this creativity. And am I saying that creativity is a horrible thing in all businesses? No, right? It's the creativity that leads to breakthroughs and growth, and a melting pot of creativity and ideas can really allow things to become more efficient. But it also can become very destructive if what you are doing is the best way to do it, but all of a sudden you convince yourself that it's not because you try to get creative, and then all of a sudden you self-sabotage that growth. So what I want to cover are the majority of things, the 4 things that keep you or lead to you getting creative that actually will harm your business and keep you from growing from where you are to where you want to be. So the first thing that leads to creativity that's destructive in business is you not being skillful at something and you not being good at something. And this might sound a little crazy, but what happens is people try something, they're not good at it. And because they don't get the result, because they're not good at it, they start trying to find new ways to generate the result, not realizing that the answer is themselves. And the answer is just an improvement in their skill set and an improvement in their abilities. You know, naturally as human beings, we try to avoid things we're bad at, and we try to move towards things we're good at because it makes us feel better about ourselves. And so if there's something that we should be doing in business that we're avoiding, or if there's something that we should be doing in business that we're convincing ourselves is not the right way, even though it might be, this could be very destructive to your business, and we got to avoid getting creative in those areas. The second thing that leads to creativity that's destructive is a lack of volume. All of a sudden, you're only putting a little bit of volume into something, and you're thinking that something doesn't work. Not realizing that something does work, and it works incredibly well. It just requires a lot more volume in order to make it work. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a system process where 90%, it has a 90% ratio. 9 out of 10 that go through it have success, or 90 out of 100 that go through it have success. And let's use the 90 out of 100. And all of a sudden, you pump the first 10 through. And the first 10 lead to failure. And one of the reasons it typically leads to failure is because, once again, you're not good at it just yet. But now all of a sudden you pump 10 into it, and it all leads to crap, and nothing goes well. Now all of a sudden you think that system or that process doesn't work, when in reality that system and that process can be extremely efficient, and it might be the best way to do it, but you just don't know because you haven't pumped enough volume into it to truly find the ratio. And so now all of a sudden, if you were to pump 100 people into it or 100 units into it, now all of a sudden the system and the process works at a 90% ratio. But because you never reach that volume, you assume it doesn't work, and now all of a sudden you start getting creative, trying to find other ways to go about getting the result. And even though those other ways might work, it might not work at the best of its abilities, and it might not be the most efficient way to get it done. So we have to be very careful when we start switching things up, when our real issue is just we have a volume issue. We're not pumping enough volume into it, and that's the true error, not the system or the process itself. The third thing that can lead to destructive creativity is comparing what you're doing to what everyone else is doing. And this happens all the time, where all of a sudden you're doing something, you see someone else start to pop off. You go copy what they're doing. You try to implement it in your business, and then all of a sudden it actually hurts your business and doesn't help your business. And I'm not saying you can't learn from everyone, but you have to be very, very careful about what you implement. And this is also why it's important to have a mentor and or a coach that you bounce everything off of before you implement it. And so let me give you an example. I had a buddy of mine that has a financial agency as well. I own a financial agency. He owns a financial agency. I'm doing very well. He's doing very well. But our models are very different. And so all of a sudden, one of my agents that I oversee says, you know what, I'm going to go learn from this guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he learned from him. He adopted some of his processes, brought it back into his business, and then tried to implement it in his business. And then all of a sudden you saw a drop in his business for a 90-day period. And it's because the processes that he was trying to implement didn't work in the market and or the demographic of people that he was building his business in. It worked for my buddy because it was a very niche market. It was a very specific market. But it didn't work for my agent because that wasn't. It was more of a wide variety of people, which means it has to be done a little bit different. And so what's my point? My point is that my buddy's way worked. My way worked. But my buddy's way only worked with a certain group of people. And because one of my agents saw him thriving and succeeding, he tried to copy it, and he did a great job at copying it, but he copied it in the wrong way and it led to failure. So we have to be very careful about what we implement into our own business. Just because you see someone else doing well, just because you see someone else thriving, just because you see someone else succeeding in an area, doesn't mean that the process that they're running is going to work in your business. There is different ways to get to 10. What do I mean by this? 2 + 8 = 10. 5 × 2 = 10. 5 + 5 = 10. There are different ways to get to 10. There are different ways to win. There are different ways to succeed. But if I'm trying to implement a 2 × 5 strategy to get to 10 in a business that only works with 5 + 5, now all of a sudden I can affect my business in a negative way. It can slow things down. It can lead to people getting distracted, and it can become a harmful distraction because you got creative rather than just doing what you should be doing. And last but not least, number 4, the fourth thing that leads to destructive creativity is you getting bored. Let me say it again. It's you getting bored. You getting tired of doing the same thing over and over again. And now all of a sudden, because you get bored and you might have some type of ADD or ADHD like myself, you start to look for things to be new. You start to create things that weren't there before. You might create problems in your own business. You might create systems that don't need to be there because the system that you're running is effective. You just need to put more volume into it. But because you got bored, you decide to implement all these different things that hurt your business. Just because you got bored doesn't mean you should change everything. And I see this happen all the time. I want you to remember this. The person that can do the boring, repetitive things the longest wins. Don't get me wrong. If there's something wrong in your business, yeah, we need to fix it. But a lot of times, there's nothing wrong with someone's business. They just get tired of doing the same thing. And so they try to change it up a little bit or make things cute or resexify it and make everything look different than what it is just because they got tired with what was in front of them, even though what was in front of them worked. So don't get bored. Get really, really good and get really, really consistent and have the mental toughness and the discipline to do the same things over and over and over again. So guys, with that being said, hopefully today helped. There are so many different things that lead to creativity in your business. A lot of times creativity can be good, but a lot of times creativity can be bad. And you got to figure out, is this a good creativity or is this a bad creativity? And the best way to find that out is to find a mentor, find a coach, find someone who's done it before with a proven track record, bounce your idea off of them. And then after you've bounced your idea off of them, then take their input with a grain of salt and then be able to make a decision. But don't just go implement it shooting from the hip just because you're bored, just because you see what someone else is doing, or just because you're not doing enough of it because you're not pumping enough volume into it. Be careful of how you get creative. Creativity is good, but be careful how you get creative. So with that being said, if you got something out of today's message, if you can do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, tell somebody about it. Obviously, we put out all this content for free. All we ask is that if you ever get something from it, you tell a friend. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next week on the Leaders Only podcast.